He's written multiple parts in a detailed series, the first of which we've been covering off and on for the last week and a half, How Goldman Secretly Bet on the U.S. Housing Crash. Let me just read you a couple lines from Greg Gordon's syndicated article. It says, to piece together Goldman's role in subprime meltdown, McClatchy reviewed hundreds of documents, SEC filings, copies of secret investment circulars, lawsuits, and interviewed numerous people familiar with the firm's activities. And then they go through in this article, piece by piece, Mr. Gordon did, exactly how this was done. And so just stating in layman terms, what do we know Goldman Sachs did? They are the only big group to get out of this. You talk about how this was used against their competition, like Bear Stearns and others. All these other groups went belly up, but Goldman Sachs came out smelling like a rose, record profits, record bonuses. At the same time, we see an overrepresentation of Goldman Sachs alumni in regulatory and government positions, and I want to get into that with you as well. But I know as a journalist, you just want to stay to the facts, but I also want to talk about these documents that you got a hold of. But, I mean, let's go through exactly what's happening here and where this is going.
And let me say that it's not an accident that so many Goldman executives go on to senior jobs in the government, because Goldman for decades has encouraged its members, once they have attained their wealth, to go and spend some time doing some public service, go and work for the government. So, it sounds noble, but the problem is that when the guys get into the government, they end up being Treasury Secretary or head of the Commodities Futures Trading Commission, which can regulate some of these derivatives, as you called them, that are traded outside the normal markets. You create appearances at the minimum that are very awkward and in some cases disturbing. Now here you had Hank Paulson serving as a Treasury Secretary at the end of the Bush administration last fall in September, when everything blew up, and it seemed as if every key decision that was made, maybe it's just a coincidence, but it seemed as if every key decision where Goldman Sachs was a stakeholder, the decision benefited Goldman Sachs. They took over Bear Stearns when Bear Stearns collapsed, and Goldman had contracts with Bear. We don't talk about this in the series, but it's true. And Goldman was able to settle out when J.P. Morgan took over Bear Stearns, and that was a deal arranged by Paulson, and then Lehman Brothers, which was a big Goldman rival, was allowed to go under. And that is going to be a decision that will be debated for a very long time. But Lehman's collapse caused a lot of disturbance in the markets, and there's been a running debate about whether Lehman should have been rescued with the rest of them. Lehman had really bet heavily in subprime and lost heavily, and then the decision was made to bail out AIG, the American International Group, and Goldman had placed $20 billion of these insurance-like bets with AIG, the American Insurance or International Group, the American International Group, and so Goldman got paid off out of this money. This rescue money from the government. Goldman was paid $12.9 billion, and over $8 billion of that related to its secret bets, hedging its subprime and other related risky mortgage-backed securities. And it's also noteworthy that when this $12.9 billion was paid off, it was 100 cents on the dollar. So it was decided that even the officials at AIG wanted to offer considerably less money to the various counterparties on all these bets it was holding. And by the way, AIG made a dreadful mistake because AIG did not reinsure all these bets. It just assumed that the housing market was going to go up forever. And when it turned south, all of a sudden, instead of just getting these nice premiums from Goldman and I presume Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers every year, paying maybe $100 million a year in premium so that they could have this insurance, all of a sudden AIG had to reimburse them all and pay off maybe $50-60 billion, and it didn't have the money, and that's when everything melted down. Well, so Goldman Sachs really always benefited from the decisions that were made by the government officials, including its alumni.
Greg Gordon's our guest. He's an investigative journalist with McClatchy Washington Bureau, and there's several parts in the series. One is how Goldman secretly bet on the U.S. housing crash. Another, Goldman takes on new role, taking away people's homes. Another one, mystery, why did Goldman stop scrutinizing loans it bought? Now, let me just be clear on this, reading over these pieces. You have Goldman Sachs, 2006, 2007, everything's supposedly wonderful, the housing market's going to keep going up forever. Anyone who says that's not the case is a conspiracy theorist. We must give everyone a loan, even if they don't even have a job or lie on their application. It's the American way. Meanwhile, they're putting out promotions saying housing's great, these instruments we're selling are wonderful, while betting against similar instruments. Did the Goldman Sachs massive shorting, did that contribute to the overall bubble beginning to burst? Because that gets into a whole nother area. Not only are they telling people these derivatives are great while they're separately betting against them secretly, but did their shorting contribute to the bubble beginning to deflate?
Well, a couple of things, Alex. One, there were derivatives. They were sold generally offshore, but the stuff they were selling here, and even to foreign customers, but they were registering and selling them here, were bonds. They were good old high yield bonds, rated AAA, but yet Goldman was hedging them. Secretly hedging them. And the second thing is, I just wanted to mention, when you talked about Goldman promoting the fact that the housing market was doing so well, I've seen reports that Goldman's chief economist was warning that a bubble was approaching, but that strikes me as also very inconsistent or odd, in that Goldman had these AAA ratings on these securities. Of course, they got them from ratings agencies, but that's
they always hedge their bet. I mean, sure, they're out here selling them, but then they also mention, there might be a problem, irrational exuberance down the road. So, oops, see, I told you so. Oh, look, all my competition's destroyed now. Oh, look, I'm making record profits. Oh, look, we're so noble. We happen to have our people all over federal regulation systems. Ooh, man, we're becoming the only player now. Gee, we sure screwed up. We sure screwed up into all this money and power.
And the thing about they always hedge their bets. These were AAA, and I asked Goldman Sachs, "Can you give me another example of AAA securities that you hedged like this?" And they did not provide such an example. They said, we hedge in a lot of our markets, et cetera. But to be betting the other way at the same time you're selling something as AAA, the question is, should they have told the investors, we also are betting that the housing market's going to turn south? Because there was a risk factor they list the risk factors in all the prospectuses which go to investors before and we're talking about, by the way, pension funds, insurance companies, foreign banks, union health and welfare funds, institutional investors. Goldman says it only sold these securities to institutional investors. So the question is, when they were peddling these things, why didn't they disclose that they were also betting the other way? And would the investors then still have purchased these securities if they knew that Goldman was betting that the housing market was going to turn south, because one of the risk factors said, it could really impact these securities if the housing market, especially in California and Florida, where things were red hot and where usually about 40-45% of every bundle of securities that Goldman and others sold came from those states, or based on mortgages that were written in those states. And so what would have happened to the sales of these securities if Goldman had acknowledged to investors, had disclosed in formal filings with the SEC or in the circulars they passed around on the deals they did in the Cayman Islands? What would happen? Would they be able to make these sales? And that's a big question.
Well, I mean, here's an example. I have a gold sponsor, and I have the gold sponsor on the air, and I really believe gold was going to go up the last 6 years from $300 an ounce to $1,000, and it has.
You're a smart guy.
But if so, I mean, it's simple. I mean, I tell people I believe this is great. Doesn't mean it's perfect. Nothing's a silver bullet. Silver and gold is as close as you get.